The sky above Aurelia. 7 bled a dark lavender hue. The twin suns dipped low behind the jagged obsidian cliffs. Below, metal screamed against metal as the last remnants of the human expedition struggled to survive in the remains of an abandoned mining outpost, hemmed in by alien hunting drones and prowling beasts bred for one purpose: obedience to Queen. Elira knelt in the shadows of the ruined foundry, oil-streaked hands pressed into the cracked ferrocrete. Her breathing was shallow, controlled. In her other hand, she gripped a cracked tablet, its screen flickering with static, connected via jury-rigged wires to a creature no human had any right to be near, much less command. A predator loomed beside her, 8 feet tall at the shoulder. Its frame was layered in living metal, sinew, and reactive armor. Its triple-jointed limbs ended in claws sharp enough to carve through bulkhead steel. A predator bred for war, for slaughter, and it watched her with piercing silver eyes. Not with hunger, not with rage, but with something dangerously close to recognition. They called it Fenrir. It wasn't the name given by the Queen or her priests. No, that was a code in their brutal language Elira didn't care to speak. She gave a name from Earth, from the stories her grandmother whispered when the bombs fell and the skies went dark. And now it followed her. Behind them, a low whine rose, the sound of recon drone circling. Her fingers danced over the tablet, bypassing another security lock embedded in the beast's neural mesh. Fenrir's ears twitched. Its gaze flicked toward the shadows, but it did not move. "Hold," she whispered. The creature did. 3 weeks ago, the idea of speaking to one of them, let alone commanding it, would have been suicidal. They were the Queen's chosen beasts, genetically perfected from apex predators harvested across dead galaxies. They tore through colonies like wildfire, leaving behind only ash and silence. No one had ever captured one. No one survived long enough to try. But Elira wasn't a soldier. She was a mechanic, and she'd learned to talk to machines. Fenrir was something in between. The recon drones passed overhead, their light spilling through the cracked ceiling in sweeping blue cones. Elira didn't breathe. The Queen's eyes were always watching now. She could feel them, somewhere in the stars above, burning with contempt, with confusion. Her killer was no longer responding to orders. Her perfect predator hesitated when told to kill a human. Because of her, when the light faded and the buzzing receded, Fenrir exhaled a low growl. Not defiance, not agitation. It was something else. Elira didn't pretend to understand it completely, but she was starting to hear the patterns in its sounds, the pulses in its cybernetic cortex, the way its body aligned with her presence. She unhooked the data cable. "We move in 5. Fenrir dipped its head. She rose to her feet, her boots crunching softly on broken glass. Around her, the bodies of former crewmates lay still. She hadn't buried them. There hadn't been time. She'd spent the last 10 days hiding, scavenging, and rebuilding systems meant for war into tools for survival. When the Queen's forces bombed the outpost, they thought they'd wiped out every human in the blast zone. They missed one, and one was enough. Elira wasn't here to survive. She was here to do the impossible, to reach the old uplink station on the other side of the dead zone. If she could connect to the orbital array, she might send a message, a warning, something the rest of humanity could use before the Queen descended fully upon the next system. But she wouldn't make it alone. Not through the waste. Not through the Queen's hunters. She needed Fenrir. And somehow, through a mix of desperation, raw skill, and something no one would believe, she cracked a hole in its programming. Not overwritten it. Not controlled it. She'd spoken to it in the only language that mattered: pain, persistence, and patience. That first night, when she found it half buried in rubble, its limbs locked in override mode, its internal systems glitching from feedback overload, it should have killed her. Instead, it stared at her as she pried off shrapnel, splice into its neural mesh, and over hours, sleepless, starving, trembling, rewired the damage enough to reboot its cognitive systems. It had watched her with those same eyes then, and still it did not kill. They moved now, slipping through the skeletal ruins of the mining district. The ground was cracked and uneven, splintered from bombardment. Every corner was a risk. But Fenrir moved like liquid death, silent and low. Elira followed in its wake. She remembered when the Queen's warships arrived, black monoliths with living hulls, no need for atmosphere, no need for mercy. Cities fell in silence. Governments collapsed within hours. Entire planets knelt before her will. She was a conqueror without equal, and her soldiers, especially the predators, were not merely tools of destruction. They were symbols, proof that nature, when refined through cruelty and selective evolution, could become divine, that made what Elira had done blasphemy. But the Queen had made a mistake. She saw only strength and violence. She underestimated the tenacity of something else, something buried deep in human resilience. Compassion. That was what made Fenrir stop. Elira believed it now, not just the code injections or the feedback loops she spliced into its system. It was the way she looked at it, not with terror, not with awe, but with understanding. "I know what it's like to be used," she had whispered that first night, fingers slick with its coolant, her tears falling hot against its cooling armor. Now, they passed through the edge of the quarantine zone. The air shimmered with ionized particles. The sky above cracked with distant energy pulses. Beacons of the Queen's fleet watching from orbit. If she sent a signal from the uplink station, they'd track it. They'd come. But if she didn't, humanity would walk blindly into extinction. She didn't flinch at the thought. She didn't have the luxury. Instead, she tightened the strap on her salvage pack and pressed a small beacon into the side of a maintenance tunnel entrance. The charge hummed. 30 seconds until detonation. Fenrir crouched beside her, tense. She didn't give a command. She didn't have to. They ran. The explosion shook the ground behind them, collapsing the tunnel, sending a false reading into the Queen's sensor grid. A trick, a go signal. She needed time, and now she had it. They skidded down into a sinkhole, half buried in older tracks and rusted scaffolding. Fenrir paused at the edge, gaze turned upward. It growled, not a warning, but a query. "What is it?" she whispered. Above, nothing moved. No drones. No patrols. And yet the hairs on Elira's neck rose. She turned, slowly, scanning the terrain with her salvage goggles. Infrared flared red, heat signatures distant but moving. Too far for a standard patrol. Too coordinated. She recognized the formation. They'd sent in the elite units. Not drones. Not mindless packs. These were handlers. Priests of the Queen's core hive. They came only when something had truly gone wrong. Her heart pounded. They weren't here for the outpost. They weren't here to scout the relay station. They were here for Fenrir. And if they got their hands on him again, if they resynced him to the hive network, everything she had done would be undone. He would become death once more. She looked up at the massive creature beside her. Its silver eyes shimmered faintly in the gloom, meeting hers. "I won't let them take you." Fenrir tilted its head, a low, echoing growl building in its throat. No command passed between them, and yet they moved as one, toward the uplink, toward war, because a mechanic and a monster had found something stronger than programming, stronger than fear. They'd found purpose, and the Queen was about to learn what happens when her perfect creation chooses to disobey. The relay tower rose like a shattered fong from the jagged terrain. Its upper spire snapped in half, cables dangling like torn sinew. What once streamed data across the system now pulsed faintly with erratic signals, choked by centuries of neglect and weeks of recent interference. Elira studied the structure from a ridge of crushed rock, wind tugging at her grimy coat. The static hum of the Queen's skyward watchers rumbling in the distance. She adjusted her goggles, isolating frequencies. The signal was still alive, just barely, degraded but recoverable. If she could reach the uplink node in the secondary control hub buried beneath the platform, she could hijack the band and punch through the Queen's suppression field long enough to transmit, assuming they weren't already tracking her. Beside her, Fenrir crouched, still and silent. Its armored form blended seamlessly with the shattered environment, every inch of it designed for efficient violence. Yet it waited, not with the tension of a beast leased to duty, but with the patience of something aware of what came next. Elira leaned close to it, speaking just above a whisper. That tower's crawling with sensors. We go loud, we die. We go smart, we might get 10 minutes. Fenrir blinked once. That was the closest thing to acknowledgement she ever got. They descended the slope with calculated precision. Every step mapped against the limited topographical data Elira had gathered from scavenged drone logs. Most of the terrain was unstable, riddled with sinkholes from old mining operations. The Queen hadn't rebuilt the area. She had no reason to. The relay had been left to rot, protected only by the assumption that no human would ever reach it alive. That assumption was about to die screaming. At the base of the tower, Elira found the access panel half buried in debris. She knelt, brushing aside layers of dust and ash. The override ports were fused, likely from sabotage, but she had something better. Fenrir's claws. One slow motion, one practice slice, and the panel peeled open like tin. She connected the tablet, watched as lines of corrupted code spilled across the screen. Encryption wasn't alien, just arrogant. Layers of redundancy designed to overwhelm brute force. But she didn't need to brute force it. She had Fenrir. She ran a pulse from the tablet into Fenrir's system, using its biometrics as a verification token. For the Queen's systems, the Predator was a master key. Elira simply had to shape the door. The lock cracked open. Inside, decaying lights flickered to life. The door groaned inward. The stench of old circuitry and ozone wafted out. She hesitated, not from fear, but from memory. She spent years in places like this before the war, in maintenance shafts and sublevels, fixing things no one saw, keeping systems alive that no one cared about until they failed. Funny how that became her strength. They moved through the dark. Fenrir's natural bioluminescence cast eerie shadows against the walls. Elira followed the old guide rails deeper, every few meters cross-referencing her position against the map she'd built in her head. The central uplink chamber was beneath the generator housing. A straight shot, if nothing had collapsed. Of course something had. The corridor ahead had caved in, not from age, but from something far more recent. She crouched near the rubble, brushing her fingers across the scorched surface. Plasma scoring. Controlled. Fenrir leaned close, sniffing, its body tensed. She didn't need to guess why. The Queen's handlers had already been here. They hadn't just come to retrieve Fenrir. They'd come to purge the node. Her plan wasn't original, and someone had anticipated it. But they hadn't expected her to survive the path to get here. She stood, eyes narrowed. They tried to shut it down, which means it still had power. Maybe still does. Fenrir growled low, soft, barely audible, but edged with warning. Elira followed its gaze. The hallway behind them pulsed faintly. A soft, rhythmic light. Not from infrastructure. From movement. She grabbed her tablet, activated the motion overlay. 9 targets. Moving in formation. Too fast for drones. Not fast enough for standard predators. Handlers. Priests of the Queen. Fanatics bred from sterile gene lines, bound entirely to the hive mind. They were more than soldiers. They were surgeons of war, designed not merely to kill, but to correct deviance. And Fenrir was a deviation. Her pulse quickened. They're tracking you. Fenrir didn't respond with fear. It shifted its stance protective between her and the oncoming threat. For a heartbeat, the implication stunned her. It was protecting her. Fall back route, she muttered, checking the map again. There's a shaft under the power conduit junction. We'll have to blast through a service panel. Fenrir moved first, tearing through a side grate with a single motion. Alira followed, squeezing through twisted support beams and slick wiring. The walls here sweated heat. Power still flowed beneath the tower. They emerged into a maintenance hatch just above the uplink housing. Beneath them, the node pulsed, still alive but weak. They had minutes, maybe less. Alira slid down the access ladder, boots clanging lightly against the metal. She didn't waste time. Tools in hand, she tore open the primary console, rerouted surge capacitors, and fed power directly through Fenrir's internal battery. Dangerous, reckless, but effective. The screen blinked green. Connection active. She began typing, faster than she ever had before. Coordinates, warnings, enemy tactics. Command code harvested from Fenrir's fractured memory. Everything she could send in the time she had. She could hear the handlers above now. Heavy steps. No talk, just movement. They didn't threaten. They didn't reason. They only cleansed. Her heart thundered. Come on, she whispered. A tremor shook the floor. Dust rained from the ceiling. Fenrir stood atop the hatch, ready to intercept. The light from its body surged brighter now, no longer passive. It wanted them to come. The first handler dropped through the hatch like a blade. It landed within human precision, claws extended. Its body was sleek, plated, thinner than Fenrir's, built for surgical speed. It struck, but Fenrir moved faster. The clash was blinding. Metal shattered. Sparks screamed. The two predators collided with a violence that shook the entire platform. Alira kept typing. 1 minute more. She didn't have time to look back. She couldn't afford to feel. A second handler dropped, then a third. Fenrir fought like nothing she'd ever seen. More than strength, more than speed. It anticipated. It learned. Every movement more refined than the last. It was not mindless. It was evolving. Blood, thick, dark, not human, splattered the walls. Alira finished the upload. She slammed the send key. The signal launched. And instantly, alarms across the tower screamed. They knew. She grabbed the tablet and turned. Fenrir stood over 3 broken bodies, chest heaving. One eye flickered. Fluid leaked from a gash along its side. But it still stood. It turned to her, then past her. A sound, a new one, vibrated through the floor. Not footsteps, not drones. Something heavier. Alira's stomach twisted. No, she breathed. They wouldn't. The hatch exploded inward. From the smoke emerged something larger than Fenrir. Heavily plated. No grace. No identity. A reset unit. A final measure. Meant not to kill Fenrir. Meant to overwrite him. It emitted a pulse that made Alira stagger, the back of her brain screaming with feedback. Fenrir snarled, body locking up for a second. The signal was pure control. A final leash. But something cracked. Fenrir dropped to one knee, but did not fall. Alira screamed through the static, voice hoarse. Fight it! The creature's eye flickered again, red, blue, red, then locked to silver. It moved, faster than it had before. The reset unit struck, but Fenrir met it mid-lunge. Not with brute strength, with strategy. Alira didn't understand what she was seeing. Every movement, every counter, calculated. It was thinking faster than it ever had before. The reset unit began to lose. And she knew, in that moment, that Fenrir was no longer obeying any code. Not the Queen's. Not hers. It had become something new, and it had chosen. Fenrir tore through the reset unit with a final, vicious strike. The chamber fell silent, except for the wheeze of damaged systems and Alira's breath. Then a single ping from her tablet. Message delivered. She looked up. Fenrir stood over the wreckage. Its body shook, not from damage, but from the effort of refusing. It looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something unmistakable in its eyes. Will, she took a step forward. Are you still with me? It gave no sound, only a nod. Above, the walls trembled with the weight of incoming reinforcements. They had minutes at best, but they had delivered the warning, and together, they would make the Queen regret ever creating a mind that could choose. The room pulsed with silent dread. Captain Idris Harlow stood at the edge of the tactical table, eyes fixed on the glowing schematic of the lower decks. The pulse line blinking red. Near cargo hold, C wasn't just a failing sensor. It was movement, real, deliberate, and far too precise to be a glitch. Beside him, Vasquez adjusted the strap of her rifle, tension crawling along her shoulders. They're in the ducts, she murmured. Not just the scouts. The elites. Movement pattern confirms it, Harlow said. They're flanking our fallback point. He tapped the control on the table. A hollow map of the crew quarters flickered on. 32 civilians huddled behind sealed blast doors. Families, engineers, medical staff. Unarmed. Terrified. Every second counted. We cut power to the adjacent bulkheads, Harlow said. Forced them into the corridor. Trap them? Vasquez asked. No. Slow them. Enough for us to burn them down. She nodded grimly. Miller's holding the generator level. We can divert. The bulkhead groaned, interrupting her. Dust rained from the ceiling. A single metallic screech rippled overhead, then another. They're testing us, Harlow said, mapping the stress points. Vasquez lifted her rifle, motioning silently to the others. Corporal Lynn, already pale, muttered under his breath. They're smart. Smarter than we thought. They're not smarter, Harlow said. Just used to pray that doesn't bite back. He moved toward the door. We bite. The corridor stretched ahead, cold and half-lit. Pipes hissed. Somewhere distant, the unmistakable crack of gunfire echoed. Miller's team already in contact. Harlow motioned them forward, every step surgical. This part of the ship had been abandoned hours ago, after they lost Sergeant Renner and half his fire team. The blood hadn't dried. Black scorch marks licked the walls. But now, something had changed. The silence wasn't empty. It was watching. They reached the emergency stairwell. Vasquez turned, aiming up, then down. No movement. No noise, until the light above them blinked and didn't come back. Then came the growl, a sound like metal grinding through bone, alien vocal cords vibrating too low for comfort, the kind of noise that made your instinct scream before your mind caught up. Lynn froze. Vasquez grabbed his arm and shoved him into the stairwell. Go! A shadow dropped from the ceiling. Not clumsy, deliberate, controlled. Clawed limbs clanged off the steel. The alien stood upright just long enough to sneer. No mouth, no expression. Just hate seething in its bioluminescent eyes. Before lunging, Harlow dropped to one knee, rifle to shoulder, and fired. 3-round burst. The first 2 rounds chewed into the creature's torso. The third took out a knee. It stumbled. Vasquez finished it with a burst of the head. But it didn't go quietly. The floor shook with its death spasm. Contact! Lynn shouted from below. 2 more incoming. Harlow cursed. Seal the hatch. Move to fallback position, Bravo. They ran, hard and fast. Each turn felt narrower. Each breath burned. This wasn't patrol anymore. It was a chase. Bravo was a storage room repurposed as a choke point. Rows of upturned crates and steel plating formed a crude barricade, and beyond it, another hallway leading directly to civilians. No margin for error. They arrived seconds before the aliens. Vasquez dropped first behind cover. Lynn followed, still pale, still shaking. Harlow set the charges at the doorway. Last resort. If they broke through, he'd take them out with the wall. The aliens didn't roar when they attacked. They didn't screech or scream or howl. They moved in silence, deliberate, terrifying silence. First one, then two, then six. They came low and fast, twisting, clawing, glowing veins pulsing beneath armor flesh. The first caught a round to the chest and kept moving. Lynn hit it again. It dropped inches from the barricade, its claws still twitching. Another leapt over the side. Vasquez shot it midair, but it landed on her side of the cover. She rolled, kicked, and fired point-blank into its face. Black blood sprayed across the crates. Then came the biggest of them all. Massive, taller, heavier, a different class entirely. An elite, covered in some kind of obsidian armor, scarred with glyphs. New contact. Harlow shouted. It didn't hesitate. It rammed the barricade with inhuman strength. The steel bent inward. Lynn screamed. Vasquez grabbed the remote detonator. Now, she asked. Harlow hesitated. Too close to the civilians. We hold. The alien reared back, and then suddenly staggered. Its side burst open in a bloom of red. Miller stepped from the hallway behind them, blood on his face, a smoking rotary shotgun in hand. "Miss me?" he said. Vasquez laughed despite herself. "You're late. Got held up. Bastard bit me. Alive? Barely." The elite roared and lunged at Miller. He stepped sideways, slammed his boot into its leg, and fired again, twice. The creature slammed into the wall and collapsed. Silence returned, but it didn't feel like a victory. Harlow looked around. We lost Lynn. Vasquez knelt beside the young corporal's body. His throat was gone. She closed his eyes with 2 fingers. "They're not stopping," she whispered. "We slow them, but we don't stop them." "Then we get smarter," Harlow said. "Divide, redirect, force them into our playground." He looked to Miller. "What did you find?" "A nest," he said. "On deck 9. Hatchery, maybe. Eggs. Weird biotubes. Breeding." Harlow's stomach clenched. "They're colonizing us." "Looks that way." Vasquez stood. "We destroy the nest. Burn it all." "Agreed," Harlow said. "But first, evacuation. We extract the civilians. Get them to the escape pods. Then we take the fight to them." Miller reloaded. "They'll expect that." Harlow smiled darkly. "Let them." The corridor leading to the civilian shelter was quiet. Too quiet. Harlow advanced alone, shoulders tight, rifle raised. His helmet mic crackled as he whispered, "No sign of contact." The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside they waited, faces pale, eyes wide. Some stood, clutching makeshift weapons, wrenches, pipes, fire extinguishers. Others crouched beside children, whispering stories they didn't believe. A little girl in a blue jumpsuit saw Harlow first. "You came back," she whispered. He knelt, rifle lowered. "Told you he would." A boy stepped forward. 10, maybe 11, clutching his sister's hand. "Are we safe?" Harlow's voice cracked just slightly. "Not yet, but we're going to fix that." Miller and Vasquez entered, weapons raised. "Clear," Vasquez said. Harlow motioned. Move them fast. Staggered lines. Miller, you lead. Vasquez, rear guard. He stayed behind as the civilians filed out, quiet but urgent. One woman paused, placing a trembling hand on his shoulder. Thank you. He nodded once. Then his radio chirped. Harlow, came a voice. Garrett, the ship's AI, reactivated after emergency override. You need to see this. Talk to me. I ran a full scan of the heat signatures near the nest. There's more than eggs. How many? Not how many. Who? There was a pause. They've got prisoners. 2 Marines. Alive. The world narrowed. Who? Renner's team. They weren't killed. They were taken. Vasquez turned sharply. That's not possible. It is, Garrett said. And one more thing. What? They're doing something to them. Neural interference. Physical modification. I think they're turning them. No one spoke. Then Miller said quietly, We burn that nest. Harlow clenched his jaw. Not yet. We get our people back. Then we burn everything. He looked toward the dark corridor ahead, where the shadows twisted like smoke. They wanted a war, he said. Now they've got one. And then he stepped into the dark, rifle raised, no longer running, this time hunting. The lower deck smelled of heat and rot. Captain Harlow descended first, boots silent on the scorched ladder rungs. The air here was thick, humid, unnaturally warm. Each breath tasted like blood and chemicals. Behind him, Vasquez scanned their flanks. Miller brought up the rear, still limping but steady, his shotgun gleaming with fresh shells. They had no illusions left. This wasn't a search and rescue. It was reclamation of bodies, of dignity, of war. Deck 9 had been stripped of its original purpose. What once held spare engine coils and coolant drums now resembled a nightmare sculpted in sinew and steel. Pulsing walls of alien membranes stretched over the ship's interior like a tumor. Black tubes snaked between vents, dripping bioluminescent fluid into hissing reservoirs. Along the far wall, transparent sacks twitched, each the size of a grown man, eggs or perhaps coffins. One of them moved. Harlow froze. Miller. Light. Miller flipped on the beam. The sack bulged, and inside, a face stared back. Renner. Unconscious. Gaunt. Naked save for metal grafts lashed his spine and neck. His eyes fluttered open, glassy and lost, before shutting again. Vasquez's voice cracked. They're still alive. But barely, Harlow said. Garrett was right. They're changing them. From the shadows came a low, grinding purr. They turned in unison. Across the chamber, a creature emerged, taller than the rest. Its armor fused with its skin. It carried no weapon, yet its very presence radiated command. An alpha, one of the hive's true leaders. It looked at them, not as prey, not as invaders, but as threats. Harlow didn't wait. Contact! Vasquez opened fire first, rounds hammering the thing's chest. It moved like smoke, impossibly fast, dodging, weaving, then leaping. Miller caught it midair with a burst from the shotgun, sending it tumbling back into the nest. It shrieked, not from pain, but in command. Everything woke up. The sacks tore open. Aliens poured out, dozens crawling from walls, ceilings, vents. The walls screamed with them. Harlow hurled a grenade into the densest cluster and dove behind cover. The explosion tore limbs and metal apart. Back to back, he barked. They formed a triangle, no retreat, no hesitation. Each shot counted. No words, just breath and fire. Vasquez dropped one with a knife to the throat, then spun, pivoted, and put 2 rounds through another's eyes. Miller staggered but remained upright, the shotgun pulsing like thunder. One got through. It latched onto Harlow's back, claws sinking deep. He grunted, twisted, slammed into a wall, and crushed it beneath his weight. Blood dripped down his armor. They kept coming. We need a bottleneck. Miller shouted. Harlow scanned, saw a maintenance tunnel barely wide enough for a man. There! They sprinted. The tunnel stank of alien resin, but it curved sharply and narrowed. Too tight for a mass rush. Miller dropped a mine at the entrance. As the first wave hit, the device triggered. Screams. Shrapnel. Silence. Buy us 60 seconds, Miller panted. They pressed forward into the nest heart. The core chamber defied all logic. It wasn't just alien, it was alive. Organic tendrils throbbed along the walls, feeding into a central cocoon, large enough to house something bigger than a soldier. Suspended within it, writhing, was another human, not Renner. A woman, one of the medics, eyes wide open, still breathing, and fused into her skull, cables alien and invasive. She looked at Harlow as he entered, spoke without moving her lips. They're listening. His blood chilled. You're awake? Her voice, unnatural and echoed, filled the room. They see through us. They learn. You taught them pain. So now they teach it back. Harlow stepped closer. What did they do to you? They made me understand. She began to convulse. Vasquez aimed her weapon. Sir. Wait, Harlow said. Look. The cocoon pulsed once, then split open, spilling her to the floor. She screamed. The walls shook. They're coming, she sobbed. Harlow lifted her carefully. Can you walk? I think so. Then move. They ran. No time for stealth. Behind them, the walls screamed again. No footsteps, just vibration, as if the ship itself cried out in agony. They reached the hatch to the fusion chamber. Miller kicked it open. This'll work. Harlow set the medic down. Vasquez sealed the inner door. She did. Garrett. Harlow barked into his comms. I need full override. Lock this section. Isolate Deck 9. The AI's voice came after a moment. Confirmed. Isolation in progress. But you should know, detonating the fusion core will destroy the ship. Can we separate the core module? Not manually. Harlow's voice was steel. Then we're out of time. He looked at Vasquez and Miller. You know what we have to do. Miller grinned, blood in his teeth. Hell of a way to go. We're not dying here. Vasquez snapped. There's another way. There isn't. Yes, there is. You stay. I go back. I take her. You trigger the overload after we get clear. Miller shook his head. Not happening. I'm faster, Vasquez said. She's right, Harlow said. And she's uninjured. Barely. Miller can't run. I have to stay to trigger the core. Miller tried to protest, but Harlow cut him off. No argument. That's an order. Vasquez locked eyes with him, then nodded. I'll get her out. She picked up the medic and ran. Harlow turned to Miller. You've got maybe 2 minutes before this place goes up. Miller nodded slowly. You always did pull the worst duty. Someone had to. They moved to the core console. Harlow's hands flew across the controls. The chamber began to glow. Final override. Confirmed. 1 minute. Outside, the aliens arrived, screaming, clawing at the sealed door. The wall dented inward. Not much time. Miller leaned against the console. Think they'll make it? I hope so. Silence fell between them. Then Harlow said, Thanks, by the way. For what? For not dying earlier. Miller chuckled. Same to you. 30 seconds. The door buckled. 5 seconds later, it burst open. Aliens poured in, dozens, maybe hundreds, but Harlow didn't fire. He just stared as the console pulsed, faster and faster. Then the core detonated. White light swallowed everything. 2 hours later, Vasquez limped down the shattered corridor of the escape vessel. The medic lay behind her, alive but unconscious. Blood stained her uniform. Her weapon was empty, her voice gone, but she walked. Ahead, stars burned in silence. A signal flared on the ship's HUD, garbled but human, a rescue beacon. She activated it, then sat back, closed her eyes, and let the silence take her. Harlow and Miller were gone, but the nest was ash. The core was molten. The ship, split open like a wound, drifted in silence behind them. And somewhere in that wreckage, something ancient and cruel had learned a terrible truth. Humans do not go quietly. They endure, they fight, and when cornered, they burn everything.